Hello everyone. This week's lesson is about the human immune system. The world around us is surrounded by germs, by pathogens. Pathogens are organisms that cause disease. Our body has evolved a complex system of defenses which keep us healthy. Okay, our immune system in specific is what fights and keeps us alive. Okay, so the immune system has two ways of fighting. The first one is the non-specific defense, and as its name suggests, it's not specific. So it fights everything basically, everything that's pathogenic, not the self. So the non-specific defense system that is created by our immune system consists of two lines. The first line of defense, or what's known as the barriers. These barriers consist the skin, which blocks the pathogens from coming in, the mucous membranes that release mucus to trap microbes. So the microbes actually go in, but then the mucous membrane, with the mucus released, to trap these microbes. Later on, the cilia and the respiratory system sweeps out the mucus with its trapped microbes. And finally, we've got the stomach acid. You know that our stomach has a pH of, it's acidic basically. Okay, so lower than 7, around 2.3 if I'm not mistaken. So the stomach acid again kills germs that enter through the nose and mouth. Again, all of this is non-specific. So the body isn't fighting against a specific disease or a specific virus or a specific pathogen. The second line of defense, we're still in the non-specific defense, okay? Actually, over here we've got the microbes that... We move on to the second line of defense. Again, we're still with the non-specific defense, okay? Over here, the purpose of this line of defense is to limit the spread of invaders, okay? In order for the specific immune response later on to attack them. We have three different types. We've got the inflammatory response, the phagocytes, and the interferons. In the inflammatory response, you all know it. It's characterized by swelling, redness, soreness, and increased temperature in that specific area. Just like when you get bitten by a mosquito or a fly, what happens to that area? It swells up, becomes red, and it starts itching. Okay? In addition, if you place your hand on any mosquito bite, you will see that it's hotter than the rest of your body. That's because your body is going through the inflammatory response, okay? Okay, so the purpose of this inflammatory response in general is to increase the blood flow to that area, thus increasing the amount of white blood cells reaching that area to fight the disease, okay? Under it, we've got the histamine, and the purpose of the histamine is to trigger vasodilation, which is the enlargement of the blood vessel, thus increasing the blood supply to the area and bringing more phagocytes to gobble up the germs, okay, or to eat them up. What's the purpose of the increased body temperature? It's basically to speed up the immune system and make it more difficult for microbes to function. We all know that microbes, or our body, or in general, each organism, each pathogen requires a specific temperature in order to function. So once the body temperature increased up, it makes it difficult for the microbes to function. Number 2 is the phagocytes. These are what we know as macrophages. You all know them. They are a type of white blood cells that extend pseudopods. Pseudopods are known as false feet. So they're extensions of the cytoplasm, and they engulf huge number of microbes, okay? So they take in the microbe and eat it up, okay? It digests it later on. Interferons are basically chemicals that are released by the immune system to fight viral infections. Viral, which means virus. Okay, viruses. So the microbe was able to cross the first line of defense and the second line of defense. Now our immune system is ready for the third line of defense, which is the specific defense. And over here, the lymphocytes become... This is where the lymphocytes come into action, okay? Lymphocytes, again, they're white blood cells, okay? specific white blood cells, we've got the B lymphocytes and the T lymphocytes. Both of them originate in the bone marrow, but they don't both mature there. They mature in different sites. The B lymphocytes mature in the bone marrow, while the T lymphocytes mature in the thymus, okay? So they originate in the bone marrow, mature, and then circulate in the blood, lymph, and lymphatic tissue like the spleen, lymph nodes, and tonsils. They recognize the specific antigens. What are antigens? They are anything that trigger an immune response, okay? So anything that is non-self. How many times have I said okay? Anyways, let's go on. So the B lymphocyte produce antibodies against a specific antigen, and this is what's called the humoral response. And the T lymphocytes fight pathogens by hand-to-hand combat, and what is known as cell-mediated response. So T lymphocytes actually attack the cell and kill it, okay? So we move on to antibodies, which are produced by B lymphocytes. They are part of the third line of defense because they are produced by B lymphocytes, okay? The antibody binds to one antibody binds to only one particular antigen. So for example, if you've got the flu, you've got a specific antibody for that flu, okay? Again, with the okays. Antibodies neutralize the antigens by binding to them, okay? So they bind to them and not allow them to do their job. So they stop their attack. They stop the antigens attacking the cells, okay, by binding to them. And then after that, we've got an antigen-antibody complex, which is the antigen and antibody together. Remember, the antigen is from the pathogen, while the antibody is from our B lymphocytes that can then be gobbled up by a phagocyte. So when we have the antigen-antibody complex, a phagocyte would pass by and gobble it up. We move to clonal selection, which is a fundamental mechanism of the development of immunity. So we've got the antigens that entered the body from the pathogens. They bind to B or T lymphocytes. Once a lymphocyte has been selected, it becomes very metabolically active and proliferates, which means it clones thousands of copies of itself. It later differentiates into a plasma cell and a memory cell. The plasma cells are responsible for fighting the antigens immediately and are known in what is called the primary immune response. The plasma cells don't live for long. After their job is done, they're dead. But we move to the memory cell, which was a result of the clonal selection again. The memory cell fight the same antigen as the plasma cell, but they remain circulating in the bloodstream. Of course, not in a huge number, in a small number. And they remain for a lifetime, okay? And this is what actually keeps you from not having the chicken pox again, or for not having the rubella or the measles or the polio or so on. So when you get vaccinated, you get memory cells in your blood circulating. Thus, when they see the same antigen again, they're ready to fight it directly. And this is what's known, and they generate a secondary immune response. So we've got the plasma cell generating the primary immune response and the memory cells generating a secondary immune response, which is known as immunological memory, okay? This is what prevents you from getting any specific viral infection. Again, viral infection, dealing with viruses. We're not talking about bacteria here, such as chickenpox more than once. We have two types of immunity, the passive immunity and the active immunity. The passive immunity is temporary, and the antibodies over here are borrowed, just like the maternal antibodies pass from the mommy to the baby through the placenta. So over here they're telling you the first milk that a newborn received from mother is called colostrum and is 100% antibodies. The active immunity is permanent, where your body actually produces the antibodies itself, okay? After being ill and recovering. Okay. So we move on to the ABO blood types. What does the ABO blood system has to do with the immune system? Whether you're type A, type B, or type O. Type A and type B produces antigens on your red blood cells. So if you're type A, you're producing antigen A on your RBCs or your red blood cells. A lot of R's in one sentence. Anyways, let's continue. So you have antigen A on your red blood cells, and in your blood you carry antibody B. Thus, as a result, if you got an improper transfusion, let's say your blood type A and you got blood type B, your blood will actually attack B because it looks so your blood will actually, or your immune system will attack the blood that you took from B, from type B, because it has antibodies against it. Okay? So certain danger from a transfusion comes when the recipient, or the one taking the blood, has antibodies to the donor's antigens, and as a result start attacking that specific blood. This is why they do what's known as a cross-match in the lab to determine and ensure compatibility of the donor's and recipient's blood type. Okay, so why is blood type O known as the universal donor? Because it doesn't have any antigen and thus does not produce any antibodies. No, stop. So blood type O, as I was saying, is the universal donor because it has no antigen but produces both antibody A and antibody B. This is why blood type O can give to anyone, can donate blood to anyone, but it cannot receive except from type O. Again, I'm going to repeat it. Blood type O is known as the universal donor because it has no blood cell antigens to be clumped by the recipient's blood. But it is the person who's carrying blood type O is producing antibodies against A and B and thus cannot receive blood from A and B. Okay, blood type AB is known as the universal recipient because there are no antibodies to clump the donor's blood. So blood type AB has both antigen A and antigen B on its RBCs, but is not producing antibodies against anything. Okay, this is why it's the universal recipient. There are 4 different human blood types, A, B, O, and AB. Look at the table over here. So blood type A has antigens A on the surface and produces antibodies B. Blood type B has antigens B and produces antibodies A. Blood type O has no antigens but produces antibodies against A and B. Blood type AB has antigens A and B on the surface of RBCs and produces no antibodies against A or B. We move on to the AIDS virus. AIDS actually stands for Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome. So people who actually have AIDS, they don't die from AIDS itself, but they die from opportunistic diseases or infections and cancers that take advantage of the immune system being down or the immune system being off for a while because of AIDS and attack the body and thus kill the human being. The virus that causes AIDS is known as HIV or human immunodeficiency virus, and it mainly attacks helper T cells. Okay, the helper T cells are responsible for the whole specific immune response. They are the one that triggers it, that tells the immune system that the specific immune response should move. So HIV is a retrovirus, which means it acts in the opposite direction. It transcribes itself in reverse. Okay, so we've got a viral RNA. Remember, RNA and DNA, they're different. The DNA actually makes the RNA, but in the case of this virus, it has the RNA, and then it changes its viral RNA into DNA and incorporates itself into the DNA of the cell, or the human cell. The host cell then integrates this newly formed DNA into its own genome and it becomes part of it. When it becomes active later on, we would have millions of cells carrying that viral DNA. We go to the last part of this chapter, which includes allergies, antibiotics, vaccines, and autoimmune diseases. Allergies are basically hypersensitive immune responses to certain substances known as allergens. And these allergens cause the release of excessive amounts of histamine. Histamine, as we spoke before, it causes the dilation of the blood vessels. Okay, so a normal allergic reaction involves redness, runny nose, and itchy eyes. Taking antihistamines can normally counteract these symptoms. However, sometimes an acute allergic response can result in a life-threatening response called anaphylactic shock that can result in death within minutes, okay? So allergies are hypersensitivities of the immune response to certain substances known as allergens. These allergens make the body release excessive histamine, which causes the blood vessel to dilate. A normal allergic response involves redness, runny nose, itchy eyes, high temperature probably. So you take antihistamines to reduce the excessive amounts of histamine. But sometimes it could end up in an anaphylactic shock and the person would die within minutes. Okay, antibiotics are medicines that kill bacteria or fungi. Okay, so we've got vaccines to prevent illness against viruses, but antibiotics are medicines that kill bacteria or fungi. So they are administered after a person is sick. So you don't go to the pharmacy and tell him to give you an antibiotic if you're not suffering from anything. You have to get sick first and then you go and you get your antibiotics. Vaccines prevent viral infections. There is no treatment for viral infections like there is for bacterial infections, but you could prevent it. So what they actually do in vaccines is that they give you the virus code or the antigens that virus carry to have the immunological memory. So later on, when you receive that virus, the body could directly fight it off. Finally, we've got that autoimmune diseases where the body actually attacks itself. There's a mistake in the immune system. The immune system believes that the self is non-self and it starts attacking it. We've got what's known as, 1 minute, let me find it, it's over here. Like multiple sclerosis, lupus, arthritis, and juvenile diabetes. Okay, multiple sclerosis is where the body actually attacks the myelin sheath around certain neurons, thus leading to the person not being able to walk properly, where the nervous system is hit. Sometimes the treatment for these diseases, the autoimmune diseases, depends on the disease itself. For example, remember hypothyroidism where the body attacks the thyroid gland? Yeah, well, you just take ultroxin, which is thyroxine. You take the hormone out, and for diabetes, they give insulin, and thus the disease is cured. In other diseases or autoimmune diseases in specific, it cannot be cured, but they try to suppress the immune system while maintaining the body's ability to fight disease. So they suppress the immune system in order not to fight your body, in order not to attack specific cells or tissues of the body. That's it for this chapter. I hope you understood it. If you have any questions, you've got my email. And finally, stay home and stay safe. Thank you.